Hello and welcome to another edition of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. We have an extra special show planned for today. Our guest is Adrienne Green, Deputy Editor of Special Projects for the New York Times Magazine. This week, the New York Times Magazine has a special edition focusing on hip hop at 50, the 50th anniversary of hip hop. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. Our host, of course, is hip hop aficionado Sri Srinivasan. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the executive producer of today's show. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so thrilled that Adrienne is joining us. This is actually a follow-up to our conversation with Jake Silverstein back in June. When we met him there, we're like, hey, we were talking to him and they said they have a special issue coming up. And we asked, well, we'd love to feature it. He said, I have just the person for you. Adrienne would love to do the show. And she is joining us today. Please like, please comment, please share, please retweet. And particularly for people who are watching this on replay, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, particularly folks on the West Coast, where it might be a little early for some of you, but not all of you, because we know there are some folks who watch early. So like I mentioned, please share this on Facebook, retweet it on Twitter, like it, share it on LinkedIn, tag people who you think might be interested in watching. We'll take a quick look at who's joined us already. We want to, our very first and understandably, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar. Yo, NYTR raps. Happy hip hop, y'all. Sujana was at Yankee Stadium on Friday night for the Hip Hop 50 celebration there. And she had some great tweets about it. I'm sure she'll share in the comments as well. Pradnya Haldapur is joining us from Silver Spring, Maryland, not far from where I am in Springfield, Virginia. Thank you, Pradnya. Our friend Stephen Kaplan, who just returned from London, is with us. So looking forward to this discussion. He worked at the Roxy back when hip hop hit the New York City club scene, and it was epic to witness and be a part of. Hip Hop 50, rock steady crew forever. My mom is joining from Hastings on Hudson, New York. Hi, Mom. And she is rightly saying that she feels bad for what happened in Maui. We will talk about that a little bit later today. I was in Hawaii last year in November. Those are some pictures behind me on the wall. We were in Lahaina on Front Street. We know a lot of the places that burned to the ground, so it hit us pretty hard as well. Paula Kiger is watching from Daytona Beach, Florida. Paula, thank you so much. Paula, of course, was a longtime producer for the show and is still very much a close friend to all of us. We have a couple more folks to welcome, but I want to bring on our host, Sri Srinivasan. Sri, hello, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
How excited are you for today's show?
I'm excited because of this.
Right?
This is Don't Knock the Hustle. That's the cover of the New York Times Magazine. 50 years of an American art form. That's the key there. An American art form that has taken over the world. And art is the right term for this. There's so much in here. We could do a 3-hour special. I don't think our guest
Okay.
is ready for 3 hours. I know
Start
you
the
are.
timer.
I know you are, but our guest isn't ready. This is such an amazing piece of journalism and a love letter to hip hop, and we're going to get into all of it. So many great photographs, so much to read and look at here. Before we bring her on, I just want to show everyone the front page of the New York Times. The cover story, the lead story is prosecutor of Biden's son is now special counsel, making a trial likelier, and about face has implications for 2024. And then here's the story about Lahaina. A town is left with just ash and anguish. Rich culture is among Lahaina's casualties.
Yeah.
And that's the photographs are so devastating. I'm sure many of you have seen them online. Bankman-Fried is sent to jail, accused of witness tampering. She's anti-war, but her advice to Russians is to just accept it. And then the last two stories here. Trump is facing a cash crunch as bills mount, and Trump warned by January 6th judge, no intimidation. So there's a lot to talk about in the news as always, but we're going to focus today on this particular issue. Let's say hi to Doug Levy. Early bird catches a worm. He is in San Francisco, awake super early, 5:30 in the morning. Welcome, Doug, former guest on the show, and we're so happy to have him. Let's see, Jonathan Borstein is here from the East Village. Hello, Jonathan. Thank you. Pradnya says hello to Neil's mom. Hello, Auntie, she says. And Joanne Flynn Black is here. Good morning from Phoenicia, New York. And Will Sullivan, this is great. Wonderful to see you here. Thanks, Will. And Pradnya is tagging people. Everyone do this. Anyone you know who loves music, loves hip hop, do what Pradnya is doing. Just tag them in the platform you're in. We do this every Sunday, 8:30 to 10 a.m. Eastern. We talk about news and newspapers. And if we're in New York, we do the New York Times, but often we do other cities as well. And we're always looking for great guests. Chris Gorman is here. He is one of my hip hop advisors and tutors, and he is great. Welcome, Chris. So we want to make sure everybody knows that we are sponsored by our friends at MuckRack. Here is their mug. We are so grateful to the team there.
Let's see the mug again.
Oh, there's the mug. Yeah. And the back of it has their logo of the octopus, which allows you to do so many things. And every journalist can get a free MuckRack verified profile. So please get that. And we want to thank our friends there for sponsoring us. If you'd like to be a sponsor, it's Sri@Digimentors.group and Neil@Digimentors.group. And we're brought to you by Digimentors, our production company that also does consulting, training. I'm doing a bunch of AI workshops around the world. Digital marketing, you want shows like this, strategic comms, training, workshops, staffing of social media folks, come to us, Digimentors.group. I'm super excited, Neil. Let's get going. We have Shadrach watching from Nairobi. I was just with him when we were teaching social media a couple of weeks ago. Hi, Shadrach. Thanks for being here. Tell all your friends, tag them. They can watch live or as soon as we're off the air on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and on Digimentors.group. All right, we're ready for our wonderful guest who is with us. She is Adrienne Green, Deputy Editor, Special Projects at the New York Times Magazine, and we are thrilled
to have her on the show. Thank you, Adrienne. We are so happy to have you. And as Sri mentioned, this is such a special edition of the magazine. So much to dig through, so much to take a look at. One of the first questions we want to start with is just, when did you start I mean, it's 50 years in the making, of course, right?
Absolutely.
But, you started working on it, but when did you first have the idea of working on it? When did you say, okay, this is coming up, we got to do something?
Definitely winter of last year. So we've worked on this entire issue for about 9 months, and looking forward to 2023, we were thinking, what are going to be big news moments? What are going to be opportunities for us to really dig into different topics in kind of innovative ways? And it felt like you couldn't think about music without acknowledging not just 50 years of hip hop, but the way that a kind of humble art form kind of took, launched itself into being what I would argue is America's kind of greatest, domestic product that is now kind of a global phenomenon. There's not a community kind of on earth that doesn't have its own hip hop scene. And that just kind of speaks to the influence and the kind of lasting meaning of the genre. And we wanted to try to capture that in the magazine.
Absolutely. And Sri is showing the magazine right there. Sri, which section are you looking at? Is that the table of contents right there?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Go ahead. That's the table of contents.
Yeah, and I believe that's Cool Herc's medallion that's being shown there.
Yeah.
What is that?
A leather medallion from DJ Cool Herc.
Got it.
Whose kind of Party in the Bronx in 1973 is actually started with the kind of beginning moment of hip hop. So when we're talking about 50 years, we're talking about 50 years since that Party in the Bronx.
August 11, right? In Sedgwick, I
August
think.
11th.
Right?
Yes.
That's something. Let's see if we can get Sri's audio back in. Sri, can we test your audio?
We're having a little bit of tech issues, but
there we go.
We're looking at the contributors list. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the contributors?
Yeah, we had an incredible set of contributors to this magazine. I'm really proud of all of the pieces that are in there. Some of my, favorites, obviously, Wesley Morris, the kind of great culture critic who's written, about all of the greats, and also is a kind of expert in the kind of Black musical tradition from, jazz to the blues to rock, and Black folks' contributions to those kind of musical art forms. And so it was, really intentional for us to have Wesley kind of bring all of that knowledge about the Black musical tradition to bear in a kind of piece talking through the kind of lasting impact of hip hop. Another piece, one of our story editors, actually, Naila Orr, who is so smart and funny and, a wonderful, wonderful editor, actually wrote a piece in this issue about the future of hip hop being female, moving from a time when women were always, present and a force to be reckoned with in hip hop, but we're now kind of entering a moment where they really proliferated the kind of top, most visible artists of our time, right? You don't just have an era with an MC Lyte or an era with a Little Kim. You're now in a moment where you have Nicki and Cardi and Lotto and the City Girls and Flo Milli and Glorilla and Ice Spice, and the list goes on, and what it means to kind of have a moment where women are dominating. And, we have some fantastic contributors for both visual and writing throughout the rest of the issue. And I'm excited to talk more about their pieces.
That's great.
In terms of the photography, we're going to see some great pictures. Do you want to just give a shout out to the team that put that together, Adrienne?
Oh my gosh. Well, first off, shout out to Kathy Ryan, David Karthus, and Rory Walsh, who brought the entire breadth of their kind of intelligence and reportorial commitment to capturing all the images here. For the archival images that you'll see, there are obviously thousands and thousands and thousands of images, and they kind of looked at the whole of what was available to kind of represent hip hop and kind of winnowed it down to obviously just a tiny slice, but a really dynamic showing of kind of what the aesthetic of hip hop has been over time. We have photo portfolios about thinking. We tried to use this issue to kind of think about the 50 years in a bunch of different ways. So we have on the cover, Jam Master Jay's my Adidas chain from Run DMC. And that is a part of an entire portfolio of jewelry that we collected from given artists and museums, and got on loan to kind of represent the kind of history of hip hop through bling and through a kind of exciting, glitzy, icy, fantastical development of, style through hip hop through the years. So that was a really fun photo portfolio to go along with Naila's piece about women in hip hop. We had our photographer and Naila fly down to Miami to Rolling Loud to speak to all of the women. I think there were 20 women performing at the Rolling Loud Music Festival in Miami. And that was an opportunity to do an entire portfolio that's so high energy and really shows these women in their performance element. And that's a really exciting set of images that are in this issue as well.
Let's just mention again this medallion. As you said, you collected a lot of jewelry, and it was a particular event that we point to as the start of the 50 years of hip hop. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the party that DJ Kool Herc threw, I believe it was a birthday party for his sister, August 11th, 1973, was the kind of moment that we kind of culturally use as the birth moment of hip hop. And so it didn't feel right, one, to do that portfolio or to do this issue in a way without recognizing both Kool Herc and the fact that hip hop is kind of a part of a kind of Black musical tradition, but it is kind of, its explosion is unique to any other art form that, exists in the history of the world, right? That the party in the Bronx and what was happening in the Bronx from a socio-political standpoint really birthed, a musical movement that has taken hold and been reinterpreted and mainstreamed and gentrified and innovated. And there's so many complications that kind of come out of hip hop's connection to being a reflection of urban life, not just in 1973, but up until now, right? That part of the argument of Wesley's piece that you're flipping through right now is that hip hop has always kind of innovated and celebrated urban life, but it's also been a way of holding a mirror up to America itself, right? That it was also made by a bunch of folks who had the setting of their lives in urban conditions that weren't always great, and kind of reflected America's abandonment of Black and brown communities. And hip hop today certainly has, a continued investment in putting forward that kind of intellectual project.
I can tell you that in my own life, I remember learning about police brutality through West Coast rap and understanding the problems, because I had not ever thought about it. It was not something you talked about in the mainstream media. And that's one of the ways I learned, just one of so many things you learn through hip hop. So what we're going to do, there's so much to talk about, Adrienne, and there's so many people watching from around the world. Let's just say hi to a couple of people. Here's Ron Thomas watching from Dubai. Ron's a former guest and watching. He's wherever he travels, he tunes in on Sundays. And we have Pradnya's continuing to tag folks across the world, including the Ruckus Avenue Music Group. And Apollo is with us in Philadelphia. By the way, as I mentioned some of these places, if you happen to know artists or folks that we should know of from the history of hip hop, jump in and let us know. I don't think Dubai has one yet that you would know.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but Philly has a whole bunch. So yeah, definitely.
Exactly.
There's from every era. You got Roots, you got Meek Mill, you have so
and DJ Jazzy Jeff and
yes, my mom is from Philly, so big shout out to Philly.
Yeah, a lot of people heard about West Philadelphia, born and raised, right? From the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And Pradnya says, jazz too, not just hip hop, is truly American and worldwide.
Absolutely.
And Diana's watching from San Francisco, the Bay Area. She is up again around 5:30 and watching. The headline on this is, in the 1980s, some people wondered whether an art form of despair and oppression would survive. It ended up conquering the world. This is Wesley Morris's piece, Hip Hop's Unshakable Force. And look at these pictures. This is Almighty KG of the Cold Crush Brothers at Harlem World in 1981. Great photo here. And here's the Queen herself around 1990. And this starts, I'm going to just read the first sentence or two. We've gathered here today to raise a glass to hip hop. It's 50, baby. Half a century of effrontery, dexterity, elasticity, rambunctiousness, ridiculousness, bleakness, spunk, swagger, juice, jiggle, and wit, of defiant arrogance, devastating humor, consumptive lust, and violent distress, of innovation, danger, doubt, and drip. Salute. This is Wesley, who's such a wonderful writer. He captures this so well. And Dr. Sujana says, I remember when Queen Latifah burst onto the scene. She was glorious, talented, fierce, telling the boys, we're not your strippers, bitches, hoes, speaking her mind as well as we should. I was a rare woman resident in a surgery field, and she showed me my strength. Give it to him, Queen, she says. And you can see people get inspired in different arenas.
100%.
Walk me through some of these pictures. Here's, of course, Run DMC.
Yes, I believe it's Run DMC, LL Cool J, Biz Markie, LL Cool J, young LL Cool J. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I believe that's from the 1980s. And yeah, this is really a fantastic set of images. Flavor Flav, our icon, all of the members of Public Enemy. It's really an exciting kind of walk through even just the early stages of hip hop. We made a decision pretty early on that we wanted to try to balance the whole issue by honoring the history of hip hop and kind of representing its new its new guard, the people who are innovating and pushing the genre forward. 50 years is an incredible amount of folks have come through the doors in 50 years, and trying to find a way to kind of evenly distribute the influence of folks in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the early aughts, the present day, was definitely a difficult challenge. But just look at the vibrancy that is represented in all of these images. It was like an honor to try to do our best to kind of represent the breadth of who hip hop is.
And Bismarcky, we see here these photographs. Look at what Dr. Sujana is saying. Oh my God, these pics are amazing. What a great issue. And we've only gotten to the first few pages. The breakdancers, Ken Swift, and in the background, Take One and Frosty Freeze of the Rocksteady crew in 1982. So far, these are all historical images we've seen so far. We haven't seen any of the young guns yet, as we will. And this is, here you go, from Philadelphia, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, 1986. Folks, tell us where you're watching from. Please tag your friends. This is such a cool issue. We're talking about the New York Times special issue on the 50 years of hip hop, and the editor who helped oversee this project is here with us. We're so lucky to have her. She's not a morning person. She had to go to bed very early to be with us this morning. We truly
I'm up early just for you, Shri.
Thank you. Patricia says hip hop is also in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. Can you talk a little bit about how they've addressed that musical breakthrough in the big museum in Washington? I know, it starts with the depths of slavery, and then as you go up, and then you go into that beautiful space where the music and of course hip hop is very big there. I hope you've had a chance to get down there.
I absolutely have. Yeah, it won the museums, like the kind of breadth of the history, like I was kind of saying about our issue, like to its most impressive degree is what the institution of the Smithsonian is doing. And yeah, absolutely, you're starting with the kind of transatlantic slave trade and kind of working your way to modern day as you kind of elevate through the floors. And when you get to hip hop, I think there is a really wonderful, not just like set of imagery and music and, collections of artifacts that kind of represent the vibrancy of the thing, but also just like a deep acknowledgement of the history of the conditions that folks were living in that are reflected throughout the music. And also to show how like New York loves to claim hip hop as the birthplace, of course, and it will always have a kind of special extra resonance here in New York, but also just to show how the globalization of hip hop actually really took place, moving from East Coast to West Coast to Houston, Memphis, Atlanta, Miami, Chicago. Like there are, just even in a domestic sense, just a deep appreciation for how hip hop has kind of manifested itself in telling the story of these Black urban centers as well.
Speaking of photography, Stefan says, I have some photos from Joe Conzo Jr., born in the Bronx, who took so many photos of the earliest days of hip hop, now a part of history with his vast archive. That is so cool to hear about that. Let's look at some of these pictures. DJ Yella, MC Ren, Eazy-E, and Dr. Dre of NWA. And here Nas from our left with Friends in Queens in 1993, and Wyclef Jean and Lauryn Hill of the Fugees in 1993. These are some amazing pictures. And so this is Salt and Peppa and Deirdre, who's DJ Spinderella of Salt and Peppa in 1989. Look at this. Will wants to know how best to sign up for this event each week. I don't want to miss this. We're live every week on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Digimentors.group. Folks, another reason you want to go to Digimentors.group, we have a link there to gift links from the New York Times. So if you don't have access to the Times or you're over your quota for the month, you can get free access to some of the stories and some parts of this issue that we're talking about. Of course, we want everyone to subscribe, not just to the New York Times, but to any local newspaper that is helping your community fight misinformation and disinformation. Any of these pictures you want to talk about?
I mean, it was so hard to narrow it down to choose all of these, but I think we really just wanted to represent the kind of jubilance of the genre and the people who listen to it and make it and the community that surrounds it. It's like, very much in alignment with a lot of musical genre. Obviously, fandom and all of that is very important to the way that we understand music and what makes it popular and all of these things. But I think there is something really special, at least feels extra special to me, about the ways that hip hop made visible the lived experience of so many people, which is what I think contributed to its great kind of boom, right? That it steps onto the scene in a certain way in 1973 and kind of takes off on such a kind of exponential kind of velocity that it is rare that you get to see that happen just in the course of 50 years, and that the folks who were present for the beginning of the genre are still here. They're still with us. There are still folks who remember, seeing Nas in Queens for the first time, seeing Jay-Z and Puff Daddy or Notorious B.I.G. I mean, naming all of the New York rappers because my father was, here in New York for the birth of hip hop, and so I learned a lot about KRS-One. And this issue is kind of also a little like shout out, love letter to my dad, who really inspired me to pay close attention to those early days of hip hop and make sure that energy and that respect for the early era was not missed. So that is we tried to do that through both the writing and through the photography.
We can guess some of your favorite artists from just the names you've said, but tell us about your early influences, the early artists you remember, early songs. Walk us through a little bit of that, and then we'll talk about this really wonderful photo.
Oh my goodness. I mean, for me, it would obviously be Biggie and Jay-Z that really formed my attachment to hip hop. Like I said, my dad is a big hip hop guy, so we did a lot of Eric B. and Rakim. I had to learn the lyrics to I Ain't No Joke and Paid in Full when I was like 10. And it goes kind of on and on from there. Big appreciator of Nas and Common and De La Soul and NWA and onward and onward, and even the new vanguard, right? That Kendrick Lamar is an incredible lyricist. Jay-Z is still kind of holding strong. I think it is miraculous to see someone's career span the number of years and the degree of influence that his has. DMX. I'm obviously New York biased, but of course there's a bunch of folks in Atlanta, a bunch of folks in Houston, a bunch of folks in Los Angeles and Chicago and elsewhere that have really defined, and innovated on the sound of hip hop.
We're looking now at this photograph in your issue. Folks, if you're just joining us, this is Can't Knock the Hustle, 50 Years of an American Art Form. And this is a crowd watching Dougie Fresh in 1995. And as viewers of the show know, we have worked with an amazing New York-based nonprofit called Hip Hop Public Health, which uses hip hop to connect Black and Brown communities around topics of public health. Long before the pandemic, people think this is something that happened during the pandemic, but they've been doing this for more than a decade, and it's just wonderful. And it's founded by Dougie Fresh and Dr. G. Williams from Columbia University. And this photo, how did you decide to run this picture of the crowd? What does this say to you? How did it speak to you?
It definitely just represented just jubilance and joy, and hip hop, I think, it is as popular and has been able to be mainstreamed in a way because it is a kind of bodily genre. You know what I mean? That it's very rare that you listen to hip hop silently and still, right? That you're often embodying the joy of the music in movement. And I felt like, and we felt like this image really represented not just how happy folks were to be, in the presence of Dougie Fresh, but also how, dynamic of an experience of going to a hip hop show is. And it felt like community is as important to the narrative of what hip hop means as the music is.
Yeah, Pradnya says, I'm generally listening in my car, singing out loud and mortifying my kids. That you're doing a great piece of education there. So thanks for doing that. Stefan shouting out one of his favorite Tribe Called Quest. And Pramod is watching from Lincoln Center, beautiful pictures, says PK Sharma. Thanks so much for joining us. Paulo is shouting out Salt and Pepper. And Stefan is also saying the art of graffiti needs to be acknowledged more in the celebration of Hip Hop 50 overall. It was such a great part of its rise. What also strikes me in this photo, Adrienne, is the call and response that you see in churches. That's what's happening here, right? You go to other art forms, people aren't trying to amplify their voice into the show itself. You know, they might tap their feet or something, but you can see here in the way the hands are that they are talking, shouting, being part of the performance.
Absolutely.
And let's see, talk about this. You mentioned it up front, Niela Orr's piece. She's an editor at the magazine, and she wrote about the future of rap is female as their male counterparts turn depressive and paranoid. It's female rappers who are having all the fun. And this is a very striking picture here.
Yes, it totally is. And if you turn the page, it is a whole portfolio of the women who were present at the Rolling Loud Music Festival. And it was such a kind of funny and dynamic photo shoot, but also Naila does a great job in this piece of kind of charting the history of women's influence in the genre and the kind of social conditions, right? That we're in a time where women's agency over their bodies and sexual liberation, and also, you know, a kind of reclamation of joy and prioritizing of oneself has kind of all conspired to find this moment where you have multiple expressions of sexuality, multiple expressions of womanhood, multiple expressions of kind of joyfulness and a kind of like multitudinous way of being a woman in the world. And it's such a fun moment to think about the fact that the kind of originating spirit of hip hop to me is all about joy in the face of hardship, of course. And that women are really embodying that spirit more than anyone else right now, I would argue. And Naila argues in the piece.
I am a hip hop fan, but more old school than new school. And so I'm going to ask you to name all these folks because I'm not sure I'll get the pronunciations right of some of these folks. So this is an educational opportunity here as well. We start with Tia.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard for me as well. It's like, I feel like I blacked out in making this issue.
The City Girls.
JT, yes, this is JT and Carisha of the City Girls. I believe on the left-hand side, that's Maya the Dawn. On the right-hand side, that's Glorilla. Big Fun, that's Flo Milli.
And this is just, the photographs are so great. The Big Boss Vet.
Yes.
Chanel, please correct me as I read these out.
Oh my goodness, no, I won't. I'm going to leave you on the limb. This is Sexy Red.
Yeah, and Lola Brooke.
Yes.
And yeah, so what are some of the other things that she says in here that will be new? Maybe we should ask that of the whole issue. What are some things here that somebody who is kind of tangentially interested and says, well, everything's been said about hip hop already, and there's so many think pieces coming out now. What do you say in this issue that would be new to people who may have read some about hip hop these recent years?
I really think this piece in particular does a really great job of not just charting the history and not just kind of giving the young girls their flowers, but also kind of making a bigger sociological point about the fact that, you know, we're not talking in universal terms or generalizing, you know, male rap versus female rap, because it's not like a perfect binary in that way. But I do think that there is a lot that it took to get to this moment, and a lot that, you know, early female rappers had to deal with. I'm talking about the Queen Latifahs and the MC Lights and et cetera, that kind of really laid the groundwork for the kind of diverse expression of womanhood that is represented by these artists. And I think that Naila has a real sense of humor and also is bringing a lot of intelligence to bear about what women mean to this genre beyond being kind of objects for the male gaze, but also that there is a way that if we're taking hip hop at its word, that it is kind of reflecting the human condition, that it is impossible to do that fully without the perspective of women. And she does a really excellent job. I hope you guys read it.
Yes, and people are already reading it, and that's so great. Here is Paulo saying gangster rap as a political monograph changed at some point. That was really, I think, dominant, as we know, in the late 80s and 90s. Talk a little bit about that, please.
I definitely think, and this is just my personal point of view, right, that I don't think we acknowledge enough that part of the mainstreaming of hip hop is connected to folks wanting to kind of observe from a comfortable distance the kind of social conditions like police brutality, like poverty, like housing instability, like lack of access to folks' basic needs. That kind of birthed a certain point of view in hip hop, and that's definitely represented in gangster rap. And I definitely think that is an era where folks were really denouncing hip hop. Folks were really not looking to celebrate the kind of next 25 years of this genre, right? Folks were very much like, denigrating how these artists chose to represent their experiences. And I think there is a certain rambunctiousness and a certain, lack of respectability politics that is present in the genre of that time that I think is super intentional and feels like a kind of nice mirror to the way that we processed the trauma of Black and brown environments in, per se, Motown, which Wesley talks about in his piece, that was kind of performing a respectability, performing a kind of joyousness and smoothness that, marked, Black folks' relationships to white environments in the 1960s and early 70s. And I think what you see in the era of gangster rap in the 80s and early 90s is a kind of rejection of needing to kind of perform like wellness and smoothness and respectability in that way. And I think it is a really, you see this in kind of protest music throughout time. You see it in the way that the genre kind of responded to other waves of either brutality or focus on, the social ills in America. You see that after George Floyd. And I do think that it is, hip hop's taking it on itself as its responsibility to kind of reflect the world and reflect America back to itself. And that's what you kind of see in gangster rap, however you might feel about the real, details of living in America as a young Black man in the instance of gangster rap. It's real and needs to be confronted. And I think that that's what the music during that time is doing.
I just messaged Wesley to tell him that we're talking about him on the show, and I hope he gets a chance to watch.
I hope so too. Big fan.
Yeah.
He's so smart, and all of this is mostly what I have learned by reading him for a very long time, and also part of the argument that surfaces in his piece. I'm doing a poor woman's job of charting a history that he does so intelligently. But
no, you did that beautifully. Thank you very much. I do have a question in terms of that watching from a safe distance. You're talking to a middle class Indian boy here who was able to watch hip hop from that distance. How do you look at the way hip hop has been adopted by folks very far apart from the reality that we were watching and talking about and imitating in some ways?
I think it's complicated and it's layered, right? That I think that music and art in general has the ability to kind of create compassion and create empathy and expose folks to a lived experience that they are not necessarily in the trenches of. And I think that it is important that hip hop has done that. I think it is also like required for us to acknowledge the ways in which we have a social narrative and a political narrative that denigrates young Black men and holds them and women and makes them vulnerable, and that vulnerability is being sold for profit, and that there are communities who have a lack of investment in improving those social conditions for these communities, and just like listening to really fun music, and that there is a tension there. And it is a social tension, it's a financial tension, it's a business tension, it's a cultural tension, but I think it's one that's always kind of gonna exist. And I think it is the responsibility, I think, of people in hip hop to continue to represent their lived experiences, which they have been doing and innovating in innovative and kind of like awe-inspiring ways over the course of 50 years, and will continue to do so. But I think it's also an obligation of folks who love hip hop and want to consider themselves a part of that community, not to do that in a voyeuristic way only, and really try to think about the ways that like music can create empathy and compassion for what folks are going through, and that you have a responsibility, I think, as a listener, not to just enjoy folks' trauma and then move along.
And I think too many people have done that in the past. And folks, we are talking to Adrienne Green. Please follow her on IG. She is staying away from the toxicity of Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days. Adrienne Green _. Please follow her there. And we're looking at some great comments coming in. Rose says, women are really embodying this. Says Adrienne Green, in keeping talking about women's role in hip hop. And Rose runs a fantastic Women to Follow show and hashtag, so everyone should check that out. Stefan gives a shout out to Heavy D and so many other greats. Always remember, we'll talk more about those folks. And Pradnya says that most of the folks I tagged were part of the first showcase of South Asian hip hop we created in the late 90s, living off the 7. There is a tension between pride of expression, artistic innovation, and cultural appropriation. So well said. Thank you. And Apollo says, one of my biggest issues with hip hop has been the branding by some record companies who traded on stereotypes to make a profit. Let's start with Death Row Records, I think has got to be the ultimate trading on those stereotypes.
Totally, but not just Def Jam, right? That there are definitely a bunch of companies that are run by white executives who kind of know what sells, right? And it is, in one way, authentic artistic expression is like a deeply necessary core of what hip hop is. And in other ways, I think certain executives and certain kind of business incentives allow for certain kinds of stereotypes to be reaffirmed throughout time, and that's kind of been harmful in a social political context.
Stefan's next comment may surprise some people who only know him as a detective on TV shows, that LL Cool J, no one, and I mean no one, commanded a stage like LL Cool J. Saw him several times, and Pradya says he still does. And that's been one of the transformations of some of these hip hop stars. Now, LL's reputation was different, but Ice Cube, and with the Barbershop series, and Ice-T with his detective shows, talk about that these people who no advertisers would have gone near, not LL, but the others would not have gone near. They were, considered public enemies, right? And here they are on CBS of all the networks in the whole world, doing shows. How did that happen? And what does that say about America as well, that these men mostly have transformed their own images?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a business incentive behind that, right? Well, I think that from a human perspective, I think folks are allowed to grow and to recontextualize themselves and to find a variety of art forms that they want to participate in and all of that. But I also think that like one's ability to kind of transition from being a musical act to a film star or a TV star or, a theater person or whatever, like is some financial system or business system or advertising system like kind of declaring that this person's popularity is worth the risk of their reputation. And in the cases of folks like Ice Cube, like that has definitely been the case. And I'm not sure that's a bad thing necessarily, but there is a financial decision that happens when folks kind of get on the bandwagon to kind of support that kind of a transition. And savvy business sense on the part of the artists as well. It's not that they're only being kind of manipulated by big business and big financial power, right? That they have a lot of agency in that process, and it wouldn't be surprising to me that Ice Cube, for example, charted the career that he has exactly on purpose. Queen Latifah too.
Yeah, Patricia asks, how does Adrienne see hip hop and gospel as a blend? Can it work as a genre gospel in hip hop, or does it need to stay apart? And asks about the work of Kirk Franklin. Your thoughts on hip hop and gospel?
I mean, I feel like they're deeply connected, right? Like how we were talking about call and response earlier, like that hip hop and gospel share a lot of kind of sonic connections, and the way that the music is formulated and the way that they rely on kind of community engagement and community support in the kind of performances of both of those genres. I feel like they're deeply connected to reinterpreting Black suffering, to creating inspiration and hope, to envisioning a kind of different future. Like there's definitely a kind of metaphorical connection between them, as much as it is like using kind of very similar parts of the musical tradition. So I think that hip hop and gospel are in conversation a lot, and they have a lot to share.
Here, Staten Island is in the house. Good morning from the Rock. That is Staten Island. Shaolin representing big hip hop weekend here with Wu-Tang. And talk for a minute, if you can, about Wu-Tang Clan.
I mean, Wu-Tang is incredible. I think it like is one of the groups that represent the kind of history of crews, and having each and every person as a part of a crew have a kind of unique skill set where everyone is so excellent in their own ways. And Staten Island doesn't get a ton of respect in the kind of battle of the boroughs or whatever, but yeah, Wu-Tang is it. And we love Redman and Method Man, and they will endure forever, even outside of the context of Wu-Tang. So it's really exciting to be able to have Hip Hop 50 be a time where folks are looking back and kind of acknowledging the kind of transformational forces of groups like Wu-Tang, like Outkast, like the Cold Crush Brothers, like, you could pick any era, and there is a crew that represents the kind of best of the genre, and in the moment, Wu-Tang was that for sure.
Folks, you're listening to Adrienne Green, Deputy Editor of Special Projects at the New York Times Magazine. We're going to go back to looking at this, but I want everyone to understand the power of the New York Times Magazine Special Projects. The most famous special project, of course, may have been just before you got there, but the 1619 project. So talk to us a little bit about these projects. So it started, for those who missed it, the 1619 project started as a project of the magazine, as a special in-depth issue, and then went on to change the world from there and become a central part of everything from the 2022 elections to how education and history is seen, not just in America, but around the world. And you are the deputy editor of special projects, and you have multiple projects a year. Like, this to me is a 1 year doing nothing else but just this project. But that is not the case.
No.
Not only were you working on multiple things at the same time, you're already moved on. Like, you're looking back at this, right? So talk about it.
I am. Yeah, no, we have definitely a whole body of special issues that we do every year. It felt like, and it is one of the reasons I love working at the New York Times Magazine. 1619 was a big part of why I took this job, because I think opportunities to kind of see milestone moments and kind of build these, deep and meaningful projects. There are very few places in the business where you can kind of do it like you can do it at the New York Times Magazine. So it's an honor to be able to work on this kind of stuff. And so we do a music issue every year. This year, it felt impossible to think about the context of that music issue without acknowledging this gigantic anniversary and the kind of all of the tendrils of the way that hip hop has kind of made itself known and made it kind of inextricably linked with American culture. And it just felt like the perfect place to kind of locate a music issue this year. But of course, we do special projects and special issues on a variety of kinds of things. So our education issue is coming up. Our climate issue is coming up. We do a Voyages issue every year about travel, our health issue this year was really great. It was all about therapy and
Yes,
what
we
it
talked about
means these days, now that it's kind of being taken out of its taboo context and you're kind of seeing it everywhere. So it's a really special kind of magazine to be able to kind of, reflect the world back to itself in these kind of innovative ways.
and you have 4 or 5 more left. It's only a few
More
months
left
left.
this year, yeah.
So tell us about those, and if you may not even remember off the top of your head when they're coming out, but roughly what can we expect, and what can you tell us?
I can tell you, yes. So the education issue is going to be publishing in the September 10th issue, and that's all about the kind of brokenness of higher education in the post-affirmative action landscape, in the kind of way that we're thinking about going about class equity, in the way that we're thinking about gender dynamics on campus, all of that. We are going to do a climate issue, and obviously anyone who's paid attention to the situation in Hawaii or in Canada, or the fact that the oceans are warming, there's never a shortage of climate stories that can be told these days. And so that's an exciting opportunity every October to kind of do a special issue about climate. After that is going to be our tech and design issue, our culture issue, and our lives they lived issue. So yeah, it's a big push toward the end of the year, but we're hoping to serve you guys some special stuff.
Can you tell us or remind us about last year's uh, Lives They Lived issue, because it was very special?
Yeah, so typically our lives they lived issue celebrate folks both normal and kind of superstar celebrity, folks who have died in that year. And last year we decided, instead of covering celebrity and trying to kind of like spread the wealth all over the place, that in the year of the Uvalde shooting, it felt important to really think about gun violence suffered by people under the age of 18. And so we committed all of our lives they lived essays and also a kind of accompanying data project to trying to tell the story of who is dying in America and why, and surfacing individual stories of families who have lost their children to this kind of horrible gun violence epidemic in this country, and trying to honor not just the kids from Uvalde, because actually school shootings make up less than 1% of the ways that a young American under the age of 18 will die. But it's kind of morbid. But actually, if you take that for the fact that, most of the instances we hear about are school shootings, then it kind of begs the question, well, where are the other 99.5%? And, the story that was told was often, it was, Black kids were more likely to die. And Latinx kids were more likely to die than white kids, more likely in urban environments than in suburban environments, many of the things that we already know, but also that if you are a person under the age of 18, gun violence, I believe 2 years ago, became the leading cause of death for those folks, overtaking drownings and accidental deaths and many of the other kind of what we would think of as normal ways that young people die. And what we wanted to do was not take for granted that it's not normal, that so many young people are dying of gun violence and its kind of surrounding effects. And we dedicated the whole issue to that last year.
Thank you, folks. We have about half an hour left with Adrienne Green. We're talking about hip hop. We're talking about the issue, the New York Times Magazine issue about hip hop. And there's so many questions and comments coming in. Apollo says there's some conversation about hip hop roots in the disco era. The melodies went into electronic synthesizer and the lyrics into rap. All this is to say hip hop is thought to be a legacy of disco by some folks. Patricia talks about all the great accomplishments that Adrienne has done representing Black women in business and history. Rose is talking about how the history of hip hop in the context of disco again. And a rapper, Apollo says, to make the point about climate change, a rapper needs to sample Greta Thunberg. Let's make that happen. Marilyn says, growing up in Brooklyn during the beginning of hip hop was special. Everyone tried to master the Sugar Hill Gang in school. And just one word about Rapper's Delight, because, by the way, if I had my druthers, if this was a in-person event, we would have been playing, we'd have had a DJ and we'd be playing music, but we can't on this show because of the algorithms of Facebook, Twitter, etc. They they look for copyright strikes everywhere, and they'll just mute our show. So that's why we're not playing music. If anybody's wondering, maybe we'll have Neil do some beatboxing at some point. I'm not sure how that will go, but we may, unless of course Adrienne wants to perform for us. No, she doesn't. But we are. So I was just going to say about the Sugar Hill Gang and Rapper's Delight. What an amazing song! It There are different cuts of songs, right? The same song. There's a 7-minute version, a 4-minute version, a 14-minute version. There's the clean lyrics. There's the not so clean lyrics. Everything is. There's so many different things that you can come to hip hop every time you listen to it. Even a single song can show new things in a way that you might not notice the first time or the 20th time you listen. Diana, watching very early in California, says, I've been a hip hop music fan since the early beginnings in the 70s. Despite being deep in the music, I continue to be slightly confused by the difference between rap and hip hop, which many people use interchangeably. Part of the problem may be in that many leading hip hop artists are rappers. Can you tell us in your words the difference? I love hearing new takes on the distinction.
I definitely think it is like depending on who you ask, type of question. So I'll just say for me, the distinction for me is that rapping is an extension of the MC, which is the spoken word over a beat, right? Hip hop artistry is a kind of bigger umbrella that includes many of the other iterations of hip hop, including graphic artists, including dance, including DJing. And those folks aren't rappers. So when I'm talking about rap, I think you are correct, or I would say that you're correct in that the early MCs are rappers, but they are supported by, or like hip hop was encompassed artistry of different forms that were not just rapping. That's kind of how I see the distinction.
Okay, that's helpful. And there's no right answer, right? This is
I don't think so. And many people might say that that's wrong, but that's how I've always understood the line.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of this of any art, that you bring your own history and story to it. There's so much to talk about. I'm going to go back into the magazine, folks. If you are just joining us, as soon as the show is over on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Digimentors.group, you'll be able to watch the video right from the beginning. So please tag your friends. They can watch us live or later. And Adrienne has given us PDFs of these stories to share with you. They want this to go out and for everyone to be able to access this issue. So go to Digimentors.group after noon Eastern. So that's in about 2.5 hours. And Neil will have put up all the PDFs at Digimentors.group/NYT read along, or just go to Digimentors.group, bookmark that page now, and you will see the PDFs added there for all these important stories. We're looking now at We Reminisce. Rap's meteoric rise as a global phenomenon has been marked from the beginning by the untimely deaths of some of its biggest stars. And We Reminisce Over You is the full headline by Danielle Smith, with photo illustrations by John Key. So talk about this issue and all these folks who have died. We can't name all of them in just this one photograph, but we see so many people. Of course, at the very top, you'll always have Biggie and Tupac.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is a piece by Danielle Smith, a beautiful, beautiful writer, but also the former editor-in-chief of Vibe. Danielle has been covering hip hop for more than 30 years, and she kind of makes the assertion that part of covering hip hop and part of loving hip hop is also having these kind of this kind of constant awareness of the vulnerability of the people who make the music, and also these kind of steady moments of mourning, and also that part of the authenticity that the genre communicates is the vulnerability of the people in the hip hop generation, right? And that is kind of pockmarked by death. As much as we love to celebrate the wins and the classics and the kind of meteoric rise of certain people's careers and the kind of wild visibility that the genre has gotten over such a quick time, it didn't feel right to kind of do a fully celebratory issue without acknowledging the cost and the cost that folks had to pay with their lives. And so, it's kind of a grim accounting that Danielle is doing, and both a kind of counting up of the folks that we lost, starting with DJ Scott LaRock and kind of ending as recently as Takeoff from the Migos earlier this year. I remember we assigned Danielle this piece right after Takeoff died, and it kind of grew and grew and grew as she kind of fully processed through the course of her career how many obituaries she's had to write, how many folks she and the hip hop community have had to mourn. And it's actually a really beautiful, I think she stops at 63 folks in this piece that are all kind of bolded throughout the issue, so you can kind of spot check the names. But it's not just the Biggies and the Tupacs and the DMXs and the Fife Dogs and Biz Marquis, and it's also not just folks who died violent deaths, right? Like part of the saddest point I think she makes in this piece is that Black folks don't get to age, right? That there are, because of not just vulnerabilities due to violence, but through systemic violence, through systemic lack of access to resources, through the ways that we're vulnerable in the medical field or in relationship to kind of trying to get adequate health care. Folks are dying really early, that there are like some of the oldest folks that she mentions in the piece are in their late 50s. And that there's something really morbid about the fact that hip hop in its most vibrant state is a young man's game, and that's a wonderful kind of dynamic part of the genre, right? But the flip side of that is we haven't gotten to see our heroes age, and what does that do to the way that the genre matures? So it's a really, really beautiful piece of writing that tries to memorialize the folks that we've lost.
You put that so beautifully. Thank you. Dr. Tachi's watching on YouTube as well as on Facebook. So thank you, Dr. Tachi. Catch her on IG. She's got a great show. She's always going live, and I'm always learning from Dr. Tachi in Fort Lauderdale. I don't know if you can name any rappers from there off the top of your head, but there's got to be somebody from that part of Florida that the world knows. Patricia says, thank you to the entire production team and special guest Adrienne. Awesome episode. We've still got about 30 minutes left, 25 minutes left. And Naomi says that I learned about hip hop by seeing Broadway's Freestyle Love Supreme with Lin-Manuel. That was amazing, and they should bring it back. And let's talk for a minute about Lin-Manuel and the impact he has had on hip hop's acceptance in Broadway and beyond. You know the story that Lin-Manuel goes to perform at a spoken word night at the White House with this thing he's working on, and from one song, the world of theater changes, and he does so much to bring that. And that tells you that there are also so many other hip hop stars who are not Black but are Latin, and who have done so much for the world of hip hop.
Absolutely. I mean, Lin-Manuel with Hamilton, I think kind of represents in the best kind of a way, the mainstreaming of hip hop, the fact that it's no longer just a musical genre, right? It has touched the theater, it has touched television and film. It is so inextricably linked with American pop culture and the way that it is disseminated all over the world, that I think that is a really positive example. I would also just say that hip hop being a representative of urban life isn't contained just to the universe of Blackness, right? That there are Latinx folks and folks from other marginalized communities that kind of live in similar circumstances and are a part of the hip hop generation and are a part of the community. And I think that there is not enough acknowledgement, I think, of folks who played really vital roles in how the genre has come to be.
Sri, we lost your audio. You need to
Sorry,
unmute your phone.
I turned it off because our dog was going a little crazy here with the door. So sorry about that. I was just reading Ron Thomas saying my father's line was his Cadillac. He said his Cadillac is gold, but he didn't say it was 10 years old. Curtis Blow, he thinks, is that line. Sujana says, I just saw an amazing video of Sinead O'Connor rapping about the truth in Ireland. It's awesome. And then there's someone else who passed very young. This is also a chance for us to go back and talk a little bit about Hip Hop Public Health, this organization that I've had the honor to work with. They talk so much about the people that have been lost in rap and hip hop, to talk about public health issues in the community. And so I encourage everybody to check out hhph.org, Hip Hop Public Health. And this was the episode we did with Dr. G.D. Williams, an organization founded by Dougie Fresh and Dr. G.D. Williams of Columbia. He's the chief of staff in the Department of Neurology, and he and Dougie are friends, and they've got on their board Ashanti and Run DMC and Chuck D and all these amazing folks on there who are doing incredible work. So check out Hip Hop Public Health, everybody. One of the things, if you're inspired by what's happening with hip hop on the 50th anniversary, find a charity, a nonprofit that's doing important work. We would suggest Hip Hop Public Health. Let's keep going, tracing the cultural etymology of some of hip hop's most iconic terms and phrases, the words on the street by Miles Marshall Lewis. And so we're going to look at some of these words, and some of them have entered kind of political speech and everything else, because we see dope, we see woke, and this must have been so much fun to put together, just this story, let alone the entire magazine. Cake, wilding, you remember, well, you're too young, but that was the biggest story back then of the mid 80s when the attack happened in Central Park. Ghost, let's see, what are the other words you remember from this?
Oh man, I mean, just narrowing down the list to 5 words was insane, right? Like, I think that you could fill a dictionary with all of the words that hip hop has either created, popularized, the ways that it has created meaning, that has kind of overtaken its original meaning. Like, hip hop's influence in a linguistic sense is like going to be felt for, it changed the English language forever, basically. And that's why we wanted to do this story. And we also wanted to make the point that in addition to kind of using, like bending the rules of language to kind of change a language is meaning, we wanted to show the ways that it kind of spread its influence beyond spoken word in the musical sense. So you'll see in newspaper articles, in memes, in television shows, in words being used in contexts that have absolutely nothing to do with the kind of original context that they were in. Like cake, for example, is now a synonym for booty in a way that has nothing to do with its original kind of tasty dessert context. But I think it is a deeper story about women's reclamation of their bodies and of their kind of sexual agency. And I think that there is a wonderful point to be made about that word, that I think that the like women and their kind of round and desired derrieres for a long time in hip hop were framed as objects for the male gaze, right? That we are hearing from male rappers talking about females' bodies. And what a wonderful thing cake represents is the fact that like women are not ceding language makers to men anymore, right? That we are also through wordplay and a level of sophistication with language, like creating a new text for the way to talk about the booty and talk about the body. And that is a really fun history to chart. There are different words that chart, you know, a kind of political a way that a word kind of has left hip hop and entered a kind of political forum, and the way in which language, I think, particularly in Black and Brown communities, has always been kind of resisting the decontextualization or the kind of taking of a word into either a mainstream context or into a disingenuous political context, and really trying to either hold on to our language or say, oh, the mainstream has found it, now we're ready to innovate onto something else. There's a new slang word, there's a new interpretation, there's a new double entendre, there's a new way of using the mechanics of speech to always kind of create in-group and out-group boundaries with language. And I think that there is, there's a brilliance to hip hop that is kind of represented, linguistically. And we tried to choose 5 words of the thousands that we could have to show the different ways that hip hop has kind of made its influence known in the kind of evolution of the English language.
So
Sri,
we're
before we move on, I want to make sure we show the online version, and also note that this is Miles Marshall Lewis's first article for the magazine.
Yes, it is.
So I want to give him a shout out and congratulate him. But as great as it is in print, we often want to show what it looks like online as well. This is the website for this article. I shared links in Facebook and LinkedIn. If you scroll down through the website, and I'm going to do that in a moment, you'll see there's a lot of movement. Now, if you click on these yellow buttons, it'll play the audio from that record. I don't want to do that because it might trigger the algorithms. I don't want to shut down our show. But check out how they put it online. I think it's really cool. You worked with the online team to do this?
I did.
Adrienne?
I did. Yeah. So we wanted to show not just we wanted to give folks an opportunity to actually hear the music. And we tried to pick some of the either earliest or the earliest uses of a word in a song or a song that kind of defined its current usage. So you'll see for Wyland, for example, it's like the record I think that we're spinning is
Right All right,
4 or
let's see,
5
Wilding.
seconds.
Let's start from the beginning. So it's it's Dope, Woke, Cake, Wilden, and Ghost.
Yes.
There's Wilden right there in the middle.
Yes. And when you go to each section, there is like a kind of greater history that's being told about the word and when it changed uses and when the earliest spoken term was and the songs that kind of popularized it, but also kind of notes about how the words have been used in broader popular culture. So for example, Sheree mentioned earlier that Wilden was used in a political context to describe the Central Park Five,
Yeah.
and I believe it was like 1989. But you also have Rihanna in 2015 singing 4 or 5 seconds from Wilden in with Paul McCartney, and that is a kind of reclamation of sorts of having someone in the community that word tried to be levied against, kind of reclaiming the word to kind of like resist respectability politics, and that is like a narrative that you see over and over now in the way that folks are using Wilden. I don't think it's often used to denigrate communities as much as the communities themselves have now reclaimed the use of that word in a kind of celebration of rambunctiousness and of breaking the rules. And that's great.
And as a reminder for folks, we have gift links to all of these articles on our website. I did put links in Facebook and LinkedIn, but if you need a gift link, check it out on our website. Click on these yellow dots to hear the music. Just a really great use of the online space and to really make this page come to life that we have on the screen. Thank you, Adrienne, for walking us through that.
I will point out for those of you who are used to us talking mostly about politics and news on here, that Donald Trump, one of the ways he made his name in the public sphere in national consciousness was with that, you could see it somewhere in here,
Right here.
The 1989, bring back the death penalty, bring back our police, 1989 calling for the death penalty in the Central Park Five. And, someone should ask him when he says, make America great again in 2016, was he talking about the times when he was clearly not happy at any point in his life, as we know in that. We've got very little time left and we've got so much more to cover. So we're going to move on here. Here's Too Short's long shadow of all the artists who was going to get, his own profile in here. I wasn't expecting Too Short. So tell us about Too Short. And the West Coast rapper is an unsung pioneer of some of the genre's most central elements, from DIY hustle to unapologetic raunch. And what a picture of Too Short.
I love Too Short. And I think it was important for me, particularly because I am aware of my own East Coast bias when it comes to telling the story of the history of New York, to know that a different way of telling the history of New York is through West Coast rap and through And when you think about West Coast rap, someone who's had kind of the most steady and successful careers, but also someone who really embodies the most ostentatious and raunchiest and kind of unapologetic expression of hip hop is Too Short. And so we wanted to, and Too Short is still performing. He is still,
We'll put a photo in here. Yeah,
I was gonna say that was a very recent show, I think in Washington State, that we went and photographed to produce the images for this piece. And we wanted to not just tell the story of Too Short's very successful career, but also how West Coast rap offers an alternative way of thinking about the vitality of hip hop, and how much Too Short has always been at the kind of not necessarily the front and center, because I think one of the funny things that he mentions in this piece is like he's always been good being the second man. He's always been good kind of like letting Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and others kind of take the heat of being the kind of most public faces of West Coast rap. But he actually had a really successful career and didn't have to bend, or maybe he had to and he didn't. And I think that is a really wonderful way of saying, like, I'm going to be exactly who I am, but also what does that mean to continue to put on that persona as a 50-something-year-old man with grandchildren, and it is an exciting way of thinking about the hip hop persona as like a young man's game, in the way that he has continued to reinterpret that kind of raunchy, fun identity over the course of 30-something years.
Right, we have very little time left with Adrienne Green here, who is deputy editor for special projects at the New York Times Magazine. I'm going to go through a few more things here, but Dr. Tachi says Pitbull, Flo Rida, Trina, Rick Ross, Trick Daddy, and more from Miami. I'm a New Yorker, even though she lives in Fort Lauderdale, so I'm biased towards New York hip hop. I do like early 2000s Atlanta hip hop, like Goody Mob and Outkast as well. And you had given a shout out to the ATL before. Last few stories. This is Ice, 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 baby. The story of hip hop can be told through the stunning and surreal evolution of the jewelry the artists wear. Someone who would just be hearing me read the title might have somehow worried that you were going to cover Vanilla Ice.
No. We had a lot of books that we had to leave on the cutting room floor, and unfortunately Vanilla Ice was that. But we wanted to tell the, hip hop, and we've kind of said this over and over in this hour that we've spent together. Hip hop is not just a music story, it's a politics story, it's an aesthetic style story, it is a community story. And so we wanted to find a way of representing how hip hop has grown into this flashy, bling, fantastical iteration of itself. And it starts with the simplicity of, a gold Dookie rope chain, or a Flavor Flav's kind of unadorned clock, to this being Tupac's ring that actually Drake just purchased. So now Drake owns this ring. Bought it from Sotheby's.
There's a famous clock. Yeah. Who did he buy it from?
Sotheby's, I think, from the estate.
Okay. And this is that was Tupac's ring from '96. This is Flavor Flav from 1988, and of course the VW sign from Mike D of the Beastie Boys. And here we have Biz Markie's custom-made Biz chain. And what else do we have? E40 and the Notorious B.I.G. And there's a Zodiac medallion. And this piece, which swings from Biggie's neck in the video of 112's Only You remix, is cataloged by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as depicting Aquarius. Presumably that was his sign. And then what are we looking at here?
That's LL Cool J's rings. And you'll see when you look at the photos from beginning to end, they kind of get more blinged out, and they get more. Those are Salt and Pepper's earrings. I can't remember whose grills are those. I think they're little.
All Walls Grills.
All Walls Grills. And that's Big Sean's Jesus piece.
Yeah, Big Sean's Jesus. Let's see what else we have here. We also have
that's Tyler the Creator's Eagle magnet.
Yep, look at that. The photography of these is also really nice. And here is Roddy's dinner plate pendant.
Yes, and I believe the fork and the knife actually come off.
So you can
So yeah, Jessica Padway was the photographer for that package, and she did a really wonderful job just celebrating the images. But I think it is a really wonderful story that like a genre with folks from really humble beginnings now kind of process that fame and the wealth that comes with it by exuding that profit, you know, by wearing it around their necks or, you know, on their wrists.
You didn't get Will to do a whole hip hop crossword puzzle, I take it.
Had we had one more month, you know, we might have been able to.
And look at the back cover here, embodies a lot of hip hop ideas and about music, right? There's Usher, and there's Remy Martin or Hennessy or Courvoisier, right? Like these are like alcohol and hip hop, and this kind of music is also connected. And so they're the ones who bought the not inexpensive back cover. We should
very much so, right? The commercialization of hip hop, you could tell that story in 1,000 different ways, and one of the ways is how much hip hop is employed as an advertising strategy, and it is its influence is undeniable at this point.
Can I have a word about Eminem from you?
A word about Eminem? I mean, I'm challenged by Eminem, but Stan. When we were talking about one of the words, we almost included Stan as a way of acknowledging Eminem. Yeah, I mean, he's like did a whole lot for the genre as a complicated man with complicated relationships to women. For
yes, including his mother.
Yeah, so he's challenging for sure, as many of the most successful artists in hip hop are. Yeah, but his influence is undeniable. So I'll say that.
Just yesterday, Vivek Ramaswamy, this long shot candidate who's buddy of Donald Trump, rapped to one of Eminem's songs on the campaign trail. And of course, this being wherever it was, Iowa or whatever, nobody reacted to it. But he should know that Eminem hates Donald Trump, and he would hate any of Vivek Ramaswamy's positions. And I'm sorry to say, Vivek is from his family's from my state in Kerala, India, but take no pride in him, and he should stop rapping on the tour. Let's see. Walter Greason says, New York Times Magazine is a national treasure. I dream that I could write for them one day. The acknowledgement of Afro-Latinx influences in hip hop is so important. And Professor Walter Greason has been a guest multiple times on our show. Jonathan Borstein says, the first hip hop I heard was in Spanish. Apollo talks about knowledge transfers that happen in jazz to sustain its own coherence and internal language always doesn't translate in hip hop given the mortality rates. It renders the genre more precious and glad it's being celebrated. Apollo, these are lines that could be in the magazine.
No.
And
that's beautiful. Someone screenshot that.
Yeah, exactly. Neil's going to screenshot that for you. And Diana says, I love hearing about the major events in hip hop that leads to mainstreaming of the genre. For me, it was the release of Walk This Way with Run DMC and Aerosmith. The video is powerful too. Walter says the Raising Hell album made Def Jam into the industry standard for 2 decades. And Diana talks about the hip hop dictionary, and we can't pass this without what a lot of people who are outside the community use to understand hip hop, and that is, of course, what started as Rap Genius and now is just Genius. And your thoughts on genius.com?
I mean, I think it is a wonderful tool, and I think it is a really important way, especially if you're looking at hip hop from a linguistic standpoint of like understanding double entendre, trying to understand kind of the baked in meaning. Like I love hip hop, and I think for folks who are in the kind of outer rings of the community or who might like appreciate the music but be kind of disconnected from its history, I think Rap Genius is one really good way of kind of orienting oneself to the history that like hip hop is all about internal reference and internal rhyme, and because it's so regional, exactly, that there's a great deal of translation work I think that's happening on Genius that is a really respectable and necessary thing.
And we now have stars going in and annotating their own songs. So if you haven't seen genius.com, it started as a way to kind of explain some of the words being used, just like woke and those kinds of words. But now any song from any genre is in there as well. That's why they dropped the rap in Rap Genius and made it just Genius. And so many more comments coming in. Ivernian Eye says, I just picked up my copy of the paper. What a great few weeks it's been reflecting on the history and legacy. It's great. Love to see what a staple rap has become in France and Francophone Africa and English-speaking countries too, of course. And Tachi agrees. And Cleaning Out My Closet, amazing piece by Eminem. I don't know that song, so I'm going to go seek it out. I have an old school playlist and a new school playlist. I learn about these songs from my younger friends, including my children, my son, and my kid brother who lives in Dubai. We're almost out of time. We want to give our guest a chance to just catch her breath. And we're going to look at the rest of the paper very quickly, just the front sections. And then we're going to come back to her for some big picture thoughts about putting together the magazine. And also, I want to hear how come her alma mater has so many people going into media. I want to hear about that when we come back. So we're going to give you a moment to catch your breath, and we're going to just look through the rest of the paper if we can. Here we go. The cover front page is about the prosecutor of Biden's son is now special counsel, somebody appointed by Trump. So this is going to be complicating the 2024 elections. We know how the entire thing with Comey and everything went down with Hillary Clinton. A town is left with just ash and anguish. Rich culture is among Lahaina's losses. It's just so sad what's happening there in Hawaii, as you can see here. And Neil spoke very eloquently about being in Maui just last year. Other stories on the front page are about the founder of the cryptocurrency, crypto exchange FTX, Bankman-Fried going to jail. The cover of the book review is Thrill Me Now, and I guess it's all about thrillers in the summer. Good, one more month of summer here in New York. The Metropolitan cover is, let's see, roaches or lanternflies, pick the city's worst summer plagues. I'm glad to tell you that I haven't seen any lanternflies this year, but last year there were so many, but maybe there's still a problem. Also, rats all over New York are always an issue. And this is the Sunday Styles cover, the saga of the jacuzzis. And an immigrant family built a fortune with a machine that defined bourgeois sensuality and yet nearly drove its members apart. Wow, what a story. There's no counselor. She's the boss. This is Diane von Furstenberg's granddaughter, 23, rescued a storied sleepaway summer camp. And look at the arts and leisure cover. Also music. Jean-Baptiste is a genre of just one. With his new album, World Music Radio, he hopes to change what you think when you hear the term world music. I can't wait to see that. And the business Sunday business cover is, here's the picture. And the cover is, what does it mean to own a book? A tech entrepreneur unveiled a digital library early in the pandemic. His good deed quickly backfired. And Beyonce and Taylor Swift make the nation shimmer. Huge tours going on around the world when Paul Krugman is, and all kinds of folks are watching and talking about things that you didn't expect. The Barbie show, the Barbie movie, and the Taylor Swift concert. That's amazing. In the real estate section, how Gen Z is struggling. Young people explain why home ownership is something they don't expect to achieve. On a different note, my own children, when it comes to cars, are just not interested. We couldn't get them to focus on getting driving lessons because they just feel they will not need to learn how to drive. And I told them this is a life skill they need to know, but so many different things going on with younger folks these days. And here is the Sunday Opinion cover, a nursing home with barbed wire and bars. America's prisons are filling with people who are so old they don't remember their crimes. What do we do with prisoners with dementia? What a piece of art here, and what a column. I'm sorry we won't have time to get into all of this because there's so much to read here. By the way, if you've noticed that I've been wearing this little bracelet, speaking of jewelry, this is from Neil's sister Amy, gave this to me in Seattle last week. There's a Hindu holiday called Rakhi, R-A-K-H.
Raksha Bandhan.
Yeah, Raksha Bandhan, Rakhi, and in it we people who they consider their brothers and their actual brothers. Women give this bracelet, and so she gave that to me. So I'm very lucky to have that.
I'll
And
just point out
one, because you didn't go to
my
Seattle.
wrist is bare.
You haven't gone to Seattle. Bridge to Bhutan says, truly enjoyed the conversation. Learned a lot as always. Thank you so much. Bhutan wasn't spared of hip hop influence, even though we got TV only in 2000. One of the reasons Bhutan, where I grew up as a child, I was there for 2 years as a very young child, is known as one of the happiest places on earth, is because they didn't have television till the year 2000. And Dr. Tachi has a question for Adrienne when she comes back. Who are the most promising up-and-coming rappers in your opinion? And Avernian says, driving and typing are life skills. And Sujana says, hope you got her a nice gift. Yes, the gift is we are showing her and we're making her famous on the New York Times Read Along. But Amy, you're
get a gift. You're supposed to make it rain, Sri. You're supposed to make it rain.
Exactly. Let's bring Adrienne back on, unless, Neil, you have anything else you want to say. I do want to say you have a great show that you've lined up for us in 2 weeks. Of course, we'll be here every Sunday, but 2 weeks from now, we want to telegraph the show that's coming up. Joan Walsh is going to be back, the author of Corporate Bullshit. You know her from TV, from The Nation, all of that. She's fantastic. She and I read the New York Times together in her favorite cafe in Manhattan just before the pandemic. That was when we used to do this in person, Neil. And we went to our favorite cafe and read the paper together. I'm going to try to see if I can convince her to do something like that. But I think we're ready for Adrienne to come back.
Absolutely. Adrienne, thank you so much. This has been incredible.
Thank you guys for having me.
So here's that question for you. Who are the most promising up-and-coming rappers in your opinion?
Oh, up and coming is tough, but I would say if you want a young rapper with a real appreciation for history, I would go to Meg Thee Stallion. I think that not only is the music good and jubilant and you will dance and you will have a great time, but I think that she's just ferocious. But if you listen to her, I think she's from Houston, you hear Outkast, you hear Biggie, you hear Pimp C, you can hear her musical influence and how much she just like knows about the genre and is innovating, the sound of it. So I think that would be my rec for anyone who doesn't already know Meg Thee Stallion.
That's so cool. So thank you for that. Any other thoughts as we wind up here, as you look back on the issue that you put together? You said this was 9 months and 50 years in the making.
Very much so. Yeah, no, I just appreciate you guys for having it and appreciate everyone for reading. I'm just a big fan of hip hop and not a historian by any means. So there are so many resources for folks who want to learn more about hip hop inside of this issue and outside. Books by Jeff Chang, Shea Serrano, Wesley Morris, who appears in the issue just on a deeper kind of history of the Black musical tradition. And so many others, Joan Morgan. And there are so many other artists that we couldn't, because of, needing to make a book with physical pages and not being able to fit the whole 50 years in there. There is so much that got left on the cutting room floor, but I just have a deep appreciation for hip hop and, looking forward to the next 50 years.
I'll mention Dan Charnas, whose book, The Big Payback, is very influential in hip hop history. He and I and others are in a hip hop discussion group on WhatsApp. This is the QR code for it. I call it Sri's Hip Hop Advisors. These are people teaching me about hip hop every day. My son is on there, as is my brother, but Chris Gorman and others. So if you are interested, just message me or DM me on any of the platforms, or just capture the this QR code. Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar is there as well. These are all people who know much more about hip hop than I do, and we have a lot of fun. We have a hip hop artist, a rapper himself on there, and then others are all just fans of hip hop. But only one ENT surgeon in Dr. Sujana who's there as well. So if you'd like to join, just message me or email me, sri@sri.net. Let's look at some of the great comments coming in.
We can also add the link to that group to our website for the show. If people
perfect. We'll do that if you'd like to join. It's a low volume, but really fun discussion. Iverian and I says, Megan the Stallion. The Stallion is such a compelling persona to behold. And let's see here. This is Sujana is doing a shout out to Indo. Check him out. And Ivernian I also says, have been all digital in my New York Times consumption for a long time. Having sought out the physical paper today, I'm sad at how it's gotten skinnier. Yes, it is skinnier, but it's still bigger than anything that you would have expected 10 years ago when predicting the death of the New York Times, as so many people did. Rose Horowitz says, I learned so much in this episode and can't wait to dive into the magazine. And Diana says, an amazing show. I learned a lot from Adrienne. I can't wait till my print copy arrives on my doorstep out in California. And Jonathan says, great show. Thank you. And a ringing endorsement from an unbiased Sudha Parekh watching, and also says Grace also watched. And
we have a comment, Sri, from LinkedIn, and this is from Priscilla Gravenhorst. Her name and face didn't come up on the screen, but I took a look at our LinkedIn page.
What a great show today. And thank you, Adrienne, for your work and special issue celebrating 50 years of hip hop. This was a great conversation, says Dr. Tachi. Thank you, Adrienne, Sri, and Neil. And this is just so much love for this, Adrienne. You should be very proud of what you do every day. I can't promise we'll be able to celebrate all your issues like this, but certainly this one. And you've promised that we will try to get some of your colleagues on when you have the special issues going forward. For those of you who are joining us, we do this every Sunday, 8:30 to 10 a.m. Eastern, to celebrate print and journalism and the fight against disinformation and misinformation. We're looking for guests from around the world. Drop Neil a note, neil@digimentors.group, if you'd like to be a guest. And we read all newspapers, so we're happy to do that. And also, we want to remind everyone at noon Eastern, that's 2 hours from now if you're watching this live, Neil will be putting on the free PDFs of these stories on Digimentors.group. You don't want to miss that. Look for the read along on there and you will be able to get all these articles. These are keepers. You'll want to print them out and have them with you. Adrienne I says, thank you, Adrienne, for your time today and your work on the issue. Can't wait to read it with breakfast. And Grace says, I love the show today about hip hop.
Grace's son, my nephew's nanny, live in nanny. She's in Hastings for the week.
Grace, thank you so much for waking up early. Sujana remembers that you woke up early. And what I want to do is leave the episode with a fun image here. And what we're looking at is I have this epic thread about hip hop that goes back multiple years. And here's Fab Five Freddy, who we must acknowledge with everything he did with Yo MTV Raps, heels and all, breaking the rules, loving this moment. This is a young lady in a sari, wearing her heels and keeping it real. I love this. And I said the OG hip hop guru, Fab Five Freddy is there. What most people don't know, or many people don't know if you're not paying attention, is that MTV refused to play black artists, not just rap artists, but black artists for the first several months. Michael Jackson was the first, and they didn't play hip hop for another couple of years after there was a kind of revolt about it. And Yo MTV Raps had a lot to do with the mainstreaming of hip hop. And we're really glad that happened. So, Neil, with that, we'll say goodbye to everybody. And thank you so much, Adrienne. You were fantastic. And we're very grateful to you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Make sure if you want to be added to our mailing list, send me an email, neil@digimentors.group, and you'll get updates on all of our shows.
Yeah, thank you. And with 3 years of archives on Digimentors.group as well, including her boss, Jake Silverstein. Neil and I got to go to his office and get the magazine on a Wednesday instead of waiting all the way to a Sunday.
Thank you very much. Have a great week. Bye-bye.